The grand banquet hall sparkled beneath dozens of golden chandeliers. Soft music drifted through the room, while elegantly dressed guests mingled and laughed. It was a night my family had been planning for almost a year, my grandfather's 75th birthday celebration. More than 100 people had gathered to honor him. Business partners, distant relatives, community leaders, and old friends filled every table. Waiters moved gracefully between guests carrying trays of gourmet food and expensive drinks. I sat alone at table 7 near the back of the hall. It wasn't an accident. My family always made sure I knew exactly where I stood. My cousins occupied the front tables near the stage. They were the stars of every family gathering. One was a successful surgeon. Another owned a chain of restaurants. A third had become a well-known corporate executive. And then there was me. I worked as a social worker in a small community center. To my family, that translated into one thing: failure. Throughout the evening, my uncle made sure everyone remembered it. "Have you met Daniel?" he would ask guests while gesturing toward me from across the room. "He's the one who chose charity work over a real career." Some people laughed politely. Others simply looked uncomfortable. My aunt was even worse. "Such a smart boy," she would say dramatically. "Imagine what he could have achieved if he had any ambition." Each comment felt familiar. I had heard versions of them for years. At first, I tried defending myself. I explained why I loved helping struggling families. I talked about the children I mentored and the elderly people I assisted. Nobody listened. Eventually, I stopped trying. It was easier to stay quiet. As dinner began, conversations filled the room. Stories of investments, promotions, luxury vacations, and business deals floated from table to table. I pushed food around my plate and waited for the evening to end. Then a woman approached my table. She appeared to be in her late 60s, dressed in a simple gray suit. Unlike most guests, she wore no expensive jewelry and carried no air of importance. "Is this seat taken?" she asked kindly. "No," I replied. She smiled and sat down. For the next hour, she barely spoke about herself. Instead, she asked questions. What did I do for work? Why had I chosen social work? What was the most rewarding part of my job? Her interest seemed genuine. So, for the first time that evening, I opened up. I told her about families facing eviction. I told her about teenagers struggling with depression. I described community programs that helped people find jobs and rebuild their lives. She listened carefully to every word. Across the room, my relatives continued making jokes at my expense. The woman heard them too. She never commented. She simply listened. As the evening progressed, the host announced that guests could share stories about my grandfather. Several relatives eagerly volunteered. One spoke about business achievements. Another praised family wealth and success. A third discussed prestigious awards and accomplishments. The speeches blended together. Then, unexpectedly, the woman at my table stood. She walked calmly toward the stage. Most guests assumed she was another distant relative. That assumption lasted only a few seconds. "Good evening," she began into the microphone. The room gradually quieted. "My name is Eleanor Brooks." Immediately, whispers spread through the crowd. Several guests straightened in their chairs. Others exchanged surprised looks. Even I recognized the name. Eleanor Brooks was one of the most respected humanitarian leaders in the country. Her foundation funded shelters, educational programs, hospitals, and disaster relief projects. She had received national recognition for decades of charitable work. Nobody understood why she was there. Eleanor smiled gently. "I wasn't originally planning to speak tonight," she said. "But after spending the evening listening, I feel compelled to say a few words." The room became silent. She turned slightly and looked toward table 7. 3 years ago, one of our foundation's youth programs nearly shut down due to lack of volunteers. People listened closely. Many organizations promised support. Very few delivered. She paused. One individual did. My stomach tightened. I suddenly had a feeling I knew where this was heading. Eleanor continued. "Every weekend for nearly 2 years, this person volunteered without compensation. He mentored teenagers who had lost hope. He spent evenings helping students apply for scholarships. He organized food drives and personally delivered supplies to families in need. Now everyone was staring at me. I wanted the floor to open beneath my chair. Eleanor ignored the growing whispers. One young man from our program was living in his car while trying to finish school. Another was recovering from addiction. A third had nowhere to go after aging out of foster care. She smiled softly. Today, all three are thriving. The room remained completely silent. The reason is sitting at table 7. Every head turned toward me. I could feel my face burning. Eleanor's voice became stronger. Tonight, I heard people describe him as unsuccessful. She looked around the room. I heard jokes about his career. No one laughed now. I heard family members suggest that helping others was somehow less valuable than earning money. A heavy silence settled over the hall. Then Eleanor spoke words I would never forget. I have spent 40 years working with world leaders, billionaires, and celebrities. Some have accomplished remarkable things, but the people I admire most are those who quietly improve lives without seeking recognition. She pointed gently toward Misui. That is what true success looks like. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Success is not measured by bank accounts. Silence. It is not measured by luxury homes. More silence. It is not measured by job titles. She paused. It is measured by the positive impact you leave behind. Several guests lowered their eyes. Others nodded slowly. A few even began applauding. The applause spread. Within moments, the entire room erupted. People stood from their chairs. The sound filled the banquet hall. For the first time in years, nobody was laughing at me. They were honoring something I had spent my life trying to do. Help others. I glanced toward my relatives. Their confident smiles had disappeared. For once, they had nothing to say. As the applause continued, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because strangers respected me, not because my family had been embarrassed, but because I finally understood something important. I had spent years seeking approval from people who measured worth through wealth and status. No matter what I accomplished, it would never be enough by their standards. And that was okay, because the families I helped didn't care about my salary. The students I mentored didn't care about my job title. The people whose lives had improved because someone believed in them had already given me something far more valuable than approval. They had given me purpose. When the applause finally ended, Eleanor returned to her seat. Guests approached my table throughout the rest of the evening. Some thanked me. Others shared stories about volunteering and community service. For the first time, people wanted to hear what I had to say. Yet the most meaningful moment came much later. As I prepared to leave, I looked around the hall one last time. The decorations were still beautiful. The music still played softly. The celebration continued. But something inside me had changed. I no longer felt like the empty seat at table 7. I no longer felt like the family disappointment. Because success had never been about impressing the loudest people in the room. It had always been about making a difference in the lives of those who needed it most. And in that moment, I realized I had been successful all along.